This is Pet Life Radio. Let's talk pets.
Welcome to Animal Rights on Pet Life Radio. This is your host, Tim Link, and I'm so glad you're joining us today. Got a really fun, fascinating, and intriguing show. I just love this author and the topic, and it gets you thinking about how wonderful our animals are and how they connect with us at a little bit deeper level. We've got author Margaret Meloni coming on to talk to us about her book, Enlightenment Unleashed, how your pet can lead you to spiritual transformation. So I just love that and love the cover of the book and everything about it. So we're going to come back and talk to Margaret Meloni a little bit about the book, talk to her about how our animals can help us form an even deeper connection. And then, of course, we'll talk a little bit about the writing of the book, how easy it was, I'm sure, to put it all together. So everybody hang tight. We'll come back right after this commercial break. You're listening to Animal Rights on Pet Life Radio.
Take a bite out of your competition. Advertise your business with an ad in Pet Life Radio podcasts and radio shows. There is no other pet-related media that is as large and reaches more pet parents and pet lovers than Pet Life Radio. With over 7 million monthly listeners, Pet Life Radio podcasts are available on all major podcast platforms, and our live radio stream goes out to over 250 million subscribers on iHeartRadio, Odyssey, TuneIn, and other streaming apps. For more information on how you can advertise on the #1 pet podcast and radio network, visit PetLifeRadio.com/advertise today.
Let's Talk Pets on PetLifeRadio.com.
Welcome back to Animal Rights on Pet Life Radio. Joining us now is author and business person and Buddhist practitioner. She's also the host of the Death Dhamma podcast. Please introduce Margaret Meloni, PhD. Margaret, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here, and I'm happy to talk to you today about writing and our pets and Buddhism and all those things and how they maybe work together.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I love the fascination about it because, my philosophy on life is we're all connected. Every energy, every being that's out there, we're all connected. My philosophy is we come from host, source, spiritual connection, and we select a body and we fulfill whatever our purpose is, hopefully, while we're in that body, and then we make that transition out. So I've always had a fascination with all the different teachers that are out there, whether we're talking about Jesus or Krishna or whoever it may be, and of course Buddha himself, and the connection with animals in general. So when I saw your wonderful book, Enlightenment Unleashed, how your pet can lead you to a spiritual transformation, I thought, we got to find out more about that and see what Margaret knows that we don't know, which I'm certain is a whole lot more than, than we can imagine.
I don't know about that. I think we do know, and maybe this book is a way to help us acknowledge it, because I think those of us who are very close to our animals, which, I'm speaking to all of you, that there's this bond. And when you're paying attention, that there are things that your pet is teaching you that sometimes we don't learn from other encounters in our lives. And I love that, you have this interest and this belief in, the host and the coming and being in a form, because that's really close to when we talk about the concept of karma in the book. We talk about Buddhist karma and the way that how we die and how we live impacts how we come back. And we might come back in a certain way for a long time. And one of those ways that we come back, one of those bodies, is the animal body.
Absolutely. And that's the fascinating topic. When we hear the word karma, I think a lot of times that gets a bad reputation, bad connotation, because it's always like, the karma's going to come back to haunt you. It's going to get you. When actually karma is much broader than that, and it's actually a very good thing.
It is. It just is. And I know we've got all the bumper stickers that say, karma is a what, and and especially in the West, we love to see somebody live their results right away. But karma, from the perspective that I'm talking about, it really simply means action. And really the way we live our lives, our thoughts, our behaviors shape the action. And sure, sometimes we dwell on this bad thing happened to you, so you must have bad karma. And I like to just say, what I have is karma. And what my cats have is karma. And what your schnauzers have is karma. And I don't want to be judgy about who I was or who they were. We're here now. this is how we are, and we have an opportunity to keep moving. And for us, as people who live with animals, we have an opportunity to help our animals shape their karma and have a better ultimate experience also.
Absolutely. One of the topics you talk about is how karma influences your bond with your pet and the connection you have with your pet. Can you expand on that a little bit further as far as how we select to come back into this body, into this world, in this universe, this plane, and our connection, that love affair we have with animals? How does that bond build and connect us?
Well, so our choice, so speaking from a specific Buddhist perspective, our choice is made, I'll say, for us based on how we live and how we die. But we can know that others around us in their different forms have probably been part of our lives at another time, Now, the unfortunate news is that a perspective is that being reborn as an animal isn't the best possible thing. Now, a lot of us, definitely people who are listening right now, you at home, my two lovely cats, cats in my past life, past current life, but they have a good experience. But some animals don't have a good experience. Some animals are strays, are out there. They're looking for food. They're looking for shelter. There are animals living in the wild who have to hunt and be hunted. And whether we like that idea or not, that can be because of how their life was before. Now, you and I, we have some inclination to be companions with animals. And maybe that's because before we had good companionship with animals, or maybe we are at a place where we are at a level to love and respect another sentient being in a certain way, and to include that little being on our journey.
And your philosophy, or the Buddhist philosophy, will say, either way you want to look at it, even with our animals, they possibly could be part of our past journeys as well, and they've come back to be part of that journey continuing forward.
Absolutely true. Absolutely true. There's a section that I talk about, something called the Jataka tales, which are stories. We almost can think of them, if you want a comparison, like Aesop's fables. And there's stories that talk about a long time ago, the Buddha was a monkey. A long time ago, the Buddha was a swan. Stories like that. And they're meant to do a couple of things. They teach Buddhist principles. They teach what it means to live a life, that's, I'll say, moral and just. But they also show us that there's this possibility to have been these different beings in different lifetimes, and that we can grow. Because again, unfortunately, an animal rebirth isn't considered to be the best rebirth. The best rebirth is to be a human. And you can see why, right? But there's the hope. There's the hope. Because if the Buddha was once a swan and then came back as a human and then became an enlightened being, so can we.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's sort of when I take a look at, I'm not a religious scholar by any mean. I'm a pseudo spiritual scholar as far as I know my journey and my path. But the philosophy I've always looked at, and when I take a look at religion, look at spirituality, there are a lot of, we'll say, religions and spiritual teachings out there that perhaps don't put the animal on the same level as a human, or have them, they're just sort of, in my opinion, oftentimes looked at as sort of an afterthought. They're a much lesser being, so we will spend less time teaching people about the value of the animal and the connection we have with them. Where it sounds like, everything I know and what you're saying about Buddhism, that's not the case.
Well, big picture, it's that we want to be kind to all beings around us. We want to show compassion to all beings around us. But I need to be fair and honest and say that if there's a choice between a human life and an animal life, Buddhism will still prioritize the human life.
There you go. But my mother-in-law, she'll prioritize it the opposite way. She always says, I want to come back as one of your animals because look at all these toys and treats and everything you give them. So I think she would rather come back.
I get that. I used to think, I'm going to come back as a cat because what a life.
Yeah, absolutely. Live a dog or a cat's life. That's the way I want to go.
Exactly. But the key is, who's cat, who's dog?
There you go.
Right? That's
There
the
you
thing.
go. Well, and that's when we talk about, I've talked to various people over the years, and I've done studies and written articles, et cetera, about the topic of reincarnation and coming back as what being are you going to be coming back as? And expanding on it a little bit further, when you talk about reincarnation, do our animals in particular in this conversation come back multiple times in our life over and over again? Or sometimes do they come back one and done and they taught their lesson, they've moved on? So from a Buddhism standpoint, it sounds like the same critters could have been with you for many, many lifetimes and perhaps in different bodies, though.
Absolutely true, because, referring back to those Jataka tales, in those Jataka tales where they're saying like the Buddha was once a monkey, the Buddha was once a swan, the Buddha was once a deer, very often in those stories, there'll be other animals, of course, and it'll say, and in this instance, the other monkey was Ananda, who was his cousin, who was like his attendant. And in this story, the crocodile was Devadatta, which was a relative of the Buddha who was jealous of him and always trying to kill him. And so they reappear in these stories as different animals. And I think that really confirms what you're saying, which is in different lifetimes, maybe the two cats that I have with me right now may have been with me as something else, or maybe one of them was a cat who was with me 12 years ago, deceased, came back. I can't know, but we can certainly make a case for the truth of that. Definitely.
Yeah. And I think that's when you talk about, knowing, is this the case? Is there a sense of knowing? I think a lot of times as humans, we look at it from a purely scientific standpoint or from a societal standpoint, and the fact that we have to have physical proof. We got to have it in our hands. Your cat has to write you a letter stating, hey, I've been here before with you. You remember when you had you used to wear the black ribbons in your hair? Just saying off the top of my head.
Exactly. That cat's got to say, hey, Margaret, when you were a little girl, your family had a cat named Hoodie, and you used to dress me in baby clothes. I'm here. Ta-da.
There you go. And then you're on the network circuit, and you got the psychic cat of the world, and you're in.
There you go.
There you go.
But the truth is, there's so much that hasn't been proven. So what we can say today is we don't know. We don't have proof now. We have these ideas. And then, okay, this is really not scientific, but we have feelings. We have different bonds with different animals who have been in our lives. And sometimes we just have this feeling.
Absolutely. And that goes back to that sense of knowing. I'm a Reiki master, and so I'm a Reiki practitioner, and part of Reiki is the, alignment of the chakras, and the center chakra is the center of your whole knowing, that, that sort of the solar plex. And so when I talk to those that aren't familiar with these terminologies, I have to sort of put it in words that perhaps the layman would understand, or those that are just not familiarized with chakras and Reiki in general. And we say, okay, the center of our knowing, we don't have to call it, the solar plex chakra, the sacral chakra. We can call it your gut feeling. Everybody knows
Exactly.
a gut feeling, and everybody has a heart connection with their animals, and they can better understand that philosophy. And I think that's where the knowing comes in. I think we do have our heart connection with our animals, and when we have a knowing that that particular animal is meant to be in our life or has been with us through various journeys of our life, we don't necessarily have to have any scientific proof or kitty writings on the scribble down proving what you were as a child.
We do not, but I sure would love if my two cats right now could tell me some things, especially one of them, because they both are rescue cats, and one of them was really feral, and sometimes he's still really feral. And I would just like him to tell me what is going on. I wish he could tell me.
That's where animal communication comes into play. So that's where we can help out and make that telepathic connection with our animals and have that sense of knowing what they're thinking or what they're doing. So one of the things that you talk about in the book, Enlightenment Unleashed, you talk about that your journey to dealing with and this discussion from Buddhism all the way now to practicing and having more research done from a healing standpoint, dealing with losses of our pets and dealing with that recovery and that emotion and the everything that's involved with that. Tell me a little bit about that journey and how your practices, as well as leading into this book, how it led you to that.
Well, I had done some other work about death and dying and grief, and it was more from the perspective of losing humans that we loved. And I was sitting next to somebody one day, and she had just lost a cat whom she had had for 19 years. And she said, I wish next you would do something to help us with the grief we feel when we lose our animal friends. And I thought about it, and I came up with nothing new. I came up with nothing new, I should say. And the reason for that was I realized we have the same feelings. We have the same sadness. We have the same grief. We have the same sense of loss, because someone who was an important being, an important relationship to us, is gone. And that's what led me to research a little bit more, because I found the idea of researching our relationship with our pets to be very compelling. But there's a chapter where I talk about, grief and dealing with loss, but it is probably the same thing that I would say to someone who had lost a beloved family member, because grief is grief, loss is loss. And that's part of what I learned on the way to do this. And so that's why I actually delved into other topics.
Yeah. Well, I love the fact that you took on this topic and did some research and sort of proved that you're right, grief is grief. And I do a lot of grief counseling when I work with clients, animals that have made their transition or are about to make their transition. And, as us humans, we like to beat ourselves up. We like to say, did I do too much? Did I not do enough? Did I do it too soon? Did I do it too late? What am I going to do now? Friends are telling me to move on. They're wanting to get me a new dog or a cat or a bird or a rabbit to help me with the process. 3 months later, I'm still crying. And is this okay? And absolutely, the answer is it's okay. The grieving process, we all go through it differently. There's no right or wrong. You have to go through it. I do know that those sad tears eventually become happy tears, and you remember all the fun and silly and loving things that you did with your animal and had the connection with your animal. But there's no right or wrong way of going through the grieving process.
Absolutely. And there's no time frame. And I really appreciate that you pointed that out. Some people may get a puppy from a litter 2 weeks later. I have had people turn to me and say, I just can't ever do this again. And so they've decided they're not going to have any more pets because they just don't want to go through the loss. And then it's somewhat in between. I had a cat that I had been with me for about 15 and a half years and very eventful years in my life. And people would joke, and maybe because he was a black cat, they'd say like, oh, he's your familiar. Or I remember one time they called me witch. Okay. And somebody else said, that's the first cat that I've ever looked at where I feel like something is looking back at me. And so we had this very close relationship, this cat and I. And when he died, I was a mess. And we had another cat. And the cute thing about that other cat was the morning after my familiar died, this cat took me over. He, the next morning, jumped up on the bed, jumped up on me, patted me on the face, woke me up, followed me around the house. So he took over, the care and feeding of Margaret. Well, it was a long time, not a full year, but several months before I would consent to bringing another companion cat into the house for Soho, who was the one left behind and taking care of me. And it took some urging. And I wasn't, when I say I was pushed, I don't mean that I was unready. I would just say that I didn't know I was ready yet. And my husband said, it's time. And I would really like us to have another cat. And can you do this? And so we did. And so everybody's story is different. We just want to respect each other in this place.
Yeah, absolutely. Just try to be there and support the best way you know how. That's all you can do. But I think it does help when people realize that it's okay to grieve for your animals at the same level or sometimes even deeper than you do for perhaps the humans that were around you, because you have that heart connection. So there's no reason why you would want to grieve or not have that connection with your animal.
And not everybody has to understand. In a perfect world, where of course we live, in a perfect world, people would say at you or I, or you and me, and they would say, I don't get it, but I respect it. And that could be enough. Now, we don't always get that. Yes, there are going to be people that are going to be like, it was just a bunny. It was just a cat. And you know what, though? Having gone through the loss of humans, as I'm sure many of you have, I will also say that there are people who think in 90 days you're done. So for all of us, it would be so nice if what we could just do is meet each other where we are and give each other space and just look and say, I don't get what she's going through, but I get that she is going through it.
I love that message. All right. Well, we're going to take a quick commercial break. Then we'll come back and talk a little bit more with Margaret Meloni about her book, Enlightenment Unleashed, how your pet can lead you to spiritual transformation. So everybody hang tight. We'll come back right after this commercial break. You're listening to Animal Rights on Pet Life Radio. Hi, this is Tim Link, animal communicator and pet expert and host of Animal Rights on Pet Life Radio. Have you ever wanted to know what your pet is really thinking? Do you want to find out if they truly understand what you're trying to tell them? Ever wish you could build a better understanding and closer relationship with your pet? Well, now you can. Learning to Communicate with Animals is a 4-part on-demand workshop. In the workshop, you'll learn the essential techniques that are necessary to communicate with animals, including what is animal communication, breathing correctly to achieve the perfect state to communicate with your animals at a deeper level, using guided meditation exercises and method to communicate with animals, and how to send and receive information from your animals. So if you're wanting to learn how to communicate and connect with your animals at a deeper level, visit PetLifeRadio.com/workshop and purchase and download Learning to Communicate with Animals. You'll be glad you did.
Let's talk pets
Let's talk pets
on Pet Life Radio.
Pet Life Radio.
PetLifeRadio.com.
Welcome back to Animal Rights on Pet Life Radio. Continue our conversation with Margaret Meloni and her book, Enlightenment Unleashed. Now, Margaret, put together the book. Was this a epiphany you had? Did you have an idea that, hey, I want to write a book about this and Buddhism and the topic of animals? Or was it somebody came to you and said, like you mentioned before, you got to write a book about this. You got to write about this.
You know, when somebody came to me and said, write about this, and I was a little lost, eventually I had an epiphany, which I think is true. Like, we like to think epiphanies are just like all of a sudden, but I think that sometimes it's because stuff is turning around in our subconscious. And so I have to be honest about something. At first, I was a little judgy, not because I understood the part about how our grief for our pets is just like it is for anyone that we've loved and lost. But it led me to think about how we really treat our animals like family. And for a minute, where a minute might mean, I don't know, a few days or something, I felt like, but should we do this? Here we are, this rich capitalistic nation, and other nations do this too, and we're spending all this money and we're elevating these critters. Is that right? And then finally, one day, I had to take the advice, that I gave a few minutes earlier. I had to take my own advice, and say, hey, Margaret, this is to myself, right? Hey, Margaret, it doesn't matter. You're not here to tell people, hey, these are animals. You're here to see how you can help. And so it's not your place to judge. And by the way, my cats are living a lovely, comfortable life. So I'm not any different than anyone else that I'm thinking of here. And so it's not my place to make judgment about the fact that we've elevated our animals in status. What I wanted to do was meet us where we were and talk about, since this is how it is, here's how they can help us in our spiritual practice. And that was where I got to finally the epiphany place.
I love that. I love that. It's interesting, from a writing perspective, whether you're writing an article or whether you're writing a book, whatever it may be, I do think we have these epiphanies, we have these things. We also have these editors and people come to us saying, you need to write about this or that. And sometimes it resonates and sometimes it doesn't, or sometimes we have to let it percolate for quite a while before we do something about it. But at the end of the day, you just highlighted just briefly there about the subconscious mind and the subconscious connection. And I'm a big practitioner or preacher of this thing called meditation. And meditation comes in all forms and shapes and sizes. It can be guided meditation, chants, mantras, whatever it may be, or it can be simply working in your garden or listening to music. Anything that allows your conscious monkey mind to shut off, allow that subconscious to open up. That's where all the ideas and the connection, I believe, with source comes through, because you allow that portal to open up and allows all these things to come through to say, hey, hey, Margaret, you need to write this book after all.
Mm-hmm. You're so right. And I do meditate. And I don't remember what I was doing at that moment when I realized, like, let go of the judginess and this is what you need to write. But I do believe that you are correct and that it is an absolute function of meditating, letting go of things, letting something else come to the surface, and in a way, letting the way that I want to live my life and my Buddhist practice really come and take the place of any feelings of, hey, you need to tell people they shouldn't be doing this. That don't write the book on don't treat your animals like people. Don't write that book.
No, nobody
Write
wants
the
that
book
book.
on how this helps us.
Absolutely. And then you may be the next guest on animal rights on Pet Life Radio. You never know. You got to write about
I
those
had no
animals.
idea at that time. I had no idea.
Absolutely. Well, writing the book, let me ask you about that process. Did you find it easy, difficult, fascinating? And are you up at 5 o'clock in the morning to get at it and get going? Or are you like me and wait till 2 days before it has to be edited and released to get it accomplished?
Oh, I love this. I'm not a morning person, so that answers the 5
There you
a.m.
go.
I worked with a writing coach a few years back, and what I want to share some of the things he taught me that really helped me. He taught me to do some mind mapping so that once you have an idea, before you write, because by the way, I can be a really linear thinker. So like the first time I wrote something, I thought that I had to like start at the beginning and finish at the end. And so as you all know, I got horribly blocked because I didn't know. And so he helped pull me away from that and just do something like maybe on a big piece of white paper where I would put my central idea in the middle and then just use colored felt pens. You can use whatever you want, to come up with all these ideas of what do I think, this will be about. And then eventually those ideas possibly become topics or chapters. And then eventually I write what I am ready to write on a given day. And eventually, of course, you get narrowed down to what's left. But so like maybe one day I'm in the mood to write about rebirth in animals and I finish that. And then maybe another day I'm in the mood to write about what animals teach us about aging and I finish that. And so that process gave me so much freedom, I'll say, away from my linear self. But in terms of the deadlines, I got to a place where I wasn't where I wanted to be. And by the way, all my deadlines are self-imposed, but I wanted the book out by a certain time and I could tell I wasn't going to get there. And so I did something that others had recommended to me. I took myself on a writing retreat and the change of scenery did me well. I live in Southern California. I went about 100 miles up the coast. I rented a little Airbnb, and for 4 or 5 days, I did nothing but get up, go get coffee and a pastry, write, go take a late lunch, go walk on the beach, write, sleep. And that helped me get where I felt I needed to be.
Nice, nice, sort of a little Walden Pond type of thing. Get away from it
Yes.
all.
Yes. And I've heard people talk about that before. And I thought, gosh, you already work at home on your own. You don't really need to do that. But this time I needed to do that. And it was so helpful.
Absolutely. So I love that. I love how you came about and the idea of realizing, like you said, get away from the linear thinking because it doesn't have to come in, chapter 1 has to be this and chapter 32 has to be this and keep going from 1 to 32 in a straight line because that never happens. I've had the fun and interesting education of the movies being on, just as a background performer type thing on various movies. And I don't think people realize that they don't go from, the intro to the end, that those same actors aren't sitting and waiting in their trailer for 8 days before their next role comes about. They they basically hire an actor, say, okay, you're in these 8 scenes throughout the movie. We're going to do all those 8, and then you're going to go back home because we're going to pay you to sit in your trailer for the next 30 days.
Yes. Yes. I just needed somebody to give me the freedom to let go of how I'm used to doing things. By the way, I used to be a computer programmer, so I think that kind of shows what was going on there. And then something else is always very helpful for me. I need editing, definitely, of course, but a developmental editor is so helpful for me. So to send a rough draft to someone who will look at it and talk about the ideas and the flow and the maybe move this here and do more of that. I love that. It helps me so much.
It's good. All those are excellent things. And I like the retreat. I think I'll take a writer's retreat, but I'm not sure if I'll do the writing. I just want to get up. I want to sleep in, go get the croissant and the coffee, and then walk on the beach. Yeah, that sounds better to me, Margaret. I don't know.
You see, I kind of made it cushy though. See, I made it cushy, right? Because yeah, I did. I had the croissant and the coffee, and then when I went out for those lunches, they were nice lunches.
Absolutely. And I think the next book, you're just going to tell your husband it has to be Paris has to be the retreat. I'm sorry. It's going to Southern France. I just have to go there because that's where my the ley lines are and where the connection with source is for me to write the best book ever.
Why not? Whatever supports your creative process, because that's really what it's about, isn't it?
That's it. Well, after putting together the book, Enlightenment Unleashed, what do you hope when people pick up the book and read through it? What do you hope they gain from it? Is there a centralized message that you have, or is there a general message that you hope they walk away with?
I hope that they walk away with a understanding of the deeper level of our relationships with our pets. So, okay, for some people, see, I call it a book for Buddhists who love pets, but for pet owners who are curious about Buddhism. And so there could be a couple things going on there, because in a way, this book is teaching Buddhist concepts. So if you're new to Buddhism, you might walk away with that. But overall, all of us, hopefully we're walking away with this understanding of the depth of feeling in these little beings and what they're bringing to us beyond just going for a walk with us, beyond sitting next to you while you watch TV. If you really pay attention, there's so much that our animal companions can really be helping us. And that help can move you forward in your spiritual life, whatever you choose, and that can bring you to a place of more joy and peace in your life.
Oh, fantastic message. I love that. And no more walking your dog and texting at the same time. That's got to be outlawed. That is not part of this book or part of our lives.
That's right, because you should be there and paying attention to your dog who is showing you things and maybe you don't know it. But when your dog is sniffing something and looking up at you, they're telling you something. They're saying, hey, over here, the dog 2 doors down was here 2 days ago. Pay attention.
That's right. I love it. All right. Well, everybody go out and pick up a copy of the book. It's a book called Enlightenment Unleashed, How Your Pet Can Lead You to Spiritual Transformation by Margaret Meloni. Margaret, we're going to post your website on the episode as well. Is there any other ways people need to be tracking you, following you, figuring out where you're at so they can meet you in person?
Oh, I love that. You can find me on Twitter or X as Margaret Meloni. You can find me on Instagram as Margaret Meloni. Sometimes I'm not as active there as I could be, but I'm definitely trying to put up. I put up the Wisdom of Willie, which is one of my cats.
Nice.
And Things Earl Says, which is one of the other cats. And I think those would probably be the 2 best places for you to find me right now. LinkedIn, want to find me professionally. Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, everybody pick up a copy of the book and definitely keep track of what Margaret Meloni, PhD, has going on. Once again, the name of the book is Enlightenment Unleashed, How Your Pet Can Lead You to Spiritual Transformation. Margaret, thanks so much for coming on the show. It was a pleasure. It's enlightening. I love the philosophy, the spirituality, and most of all, how we can truly connect with our animals. I love the message.
Thank you so much. And I loved this conversation. And thank you for everything that you do.
Absolutely. Well, we're coming to the end of the show today. I want to thank everyone for listening to Animal Rights on Pet Life Radio. I want to thank the producers and sponsors for making this show possible. If you have any ideas, thoughts, or comments, or people you want to see or hear on the show, drop us a line. You can go to PetLifeRadio.com, and we'll be glad to entertain your comments, answer your questions, and bring on the people you want to hear from most. And so next time, write a great story about the animals in your life, and who knows, you may be the next guest on Animal Rights on Pet Life Radio. Have a great day.
Let's Talk Pets, every week on demand, only on PetLifeRadio.com.